I'm Ryan Halford, and I love craniosacral therapy. From the theory, to the practice, to the people, there's always something in cranial work that fuels a sense of adventure in my life. I'd like to share that adventure with you on the Craniosacral Podcast.
Hello, my craniosacral friends. This is episode 48 of the Craniosacral Podcast. My favorite number is 8, and I just love looking at my screen here and seeing that beautiful, symmetrical, round, motherly yin 8 on the end of our episode number today. It is a stunningly beautiful day here in North Texas, with some unseasonably warm weather and clear skies. Nature just feels happy this morning, and it's kind of contagious. So I'm feeling happy too. What an amazing, amazing gift to be breathing right now. To be sensing my embodiment, to be feeling life, to be aware. I hope you are all feeling well and feeling happy, and growing in important ways in your life, expanding your knowledge of the world, evolving spiritually, and enjoying the richness that good relationships bring to our lives. I just returned home from spending some time with Shea, whom I sponsored for a class over here. I always have a lot of fun with Michael, and this time was no exception. We laughed a lot during our time together and talked a lot about the current craniosacral scene worldwide, and I picked that great mind of his about all kinds of other topics. We were roommates for the week, so that made it easier for me to finally corner him for an interview for you guys, which I'm really glad to bring to you today. But before we get to that, I do have a couple quick announcements. First, this is your last chance to get a free spot in Robin Scher and Kate McKinnon's upcoming class, Elements of a Successful Craniosacral Business. This training is custom tailored for you, craniosacral therapists, to help you fine-tune your business life. It covers multiple angles of a craniosacral private practice, including marketing, professional boundaries, goal setting, and tons more. I will be giving away 2 free seats to this class in a drawing for everyone who signs up for my email list. If you are already on the list, just send me an email, tell me you'd like to be included. I'll be happy to put you in the drawing. The class starts about 2 weeks from now, on February 27th. My email is ryan@craniosacralpodcast.com. Shoot me a line and let me know you want to be included, and maybe you can win a free seat to this great class. This is the last time they're going to do it, so I jump on board now. There'll be a link to their class and more information about it in the show notes. Now, secondly, thank you to those of you who recently sent in email feedback and or donated to support the podcast financially. And that includes Simon B., Lisa E., Maggie R., Larissa D., Helen C., Katra K., Nicholas L., and Marie K. Thank you guys. I really appreciate your generosity. Well, today we're going to hear from Shea, who we have heard from in previous episodes on the podcast. Michael's one of the more prolific authors and teachers in our field. And in case you didn't know, Michael has written I guess at least 8 books on cranial and fascial work, including the 5-volume series Biodynamic Craniosacral Therapy. So Mike's going to share a bit about his personal life in this interview, talk about his upcoming book on metabolic syndrome, elaborate some on cardiovascular work, and hit on many other topics that I think you'll find pretty interesting. Mike is so much fun to hang out with. We often get quite goofy when we're together, but we managed to keep that under control for this interview, so I'm quite happy to bring you his energy in this episode. Well, that's about it. Let's get to it and learn more about what Michael has been up to lately.
So finally, much awaited, I get to do an interview with Michael Shea. I am really happy to finally be able to spend some face-to-face time with you with the mic running. Although over the last several days, being roommates, we were able to spend some time.
Right.
But now we're gonna get to stick a mic in front of us and record our shenanigans for the world. Michael's been teaching all day today. Thank you for taking time after class today, after you've been working, to talk some more with us and share. So I've been into gratitude lately, and I've been doing a gratitude journal every morning, writing down things that I'm grateful for. So I kind of wanted to open with that. What are some things you're grateful for?
Well, I think, thank you for asking that. And actually, thank you for this interview. It's always great to be with you personally. And you're right, this is the first time we've done an interview. I'm not that elusive. I just travel a lot. And my wife will tell you that I travel a lot. The gratitude thing for me really comes in two pieces. Because before I really started getting into the gratitude, and especially like gratitude for my parents, and now I really, as I approach 70, appreciate completely and totally everything that my mother and father did for me. And so I reflect on that almost constantly, as a way of developing patience, both for myself and, within my marriage and with students and within my whole life. So that gratitude piece for me really starts with my mom and dad. I loved them both dearly. It's just been a good run. They gave me a foundation. And when my father saw I was headed in a very different alternative direction, when I got out of university, was completely and totally supportive at every level. Said, go do it, follow your dreams, even if that happens to be a massage school and not a law office, because I was destined to be a lawyer. So at any rate, I think in terms of gratitude, that's my first movement, is always towards my mom and dad. I'm also grateful for having a marriage now that's lasted, 28 years. We just had our 27th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
It's been a really great run. We're totally in love with each other. We totally have problems just like everybody else, and we work them out. And for that, I'm just so grateful that I can go to bed not angry. Early in my marriage, I used to go to bed angry at certain things that were going on, in the relationship. And now I don't do that. And I'm just grateful that I can go to bed at peace with my wife, and we can be there. But I think for me, what's interesting is before I started feeling that level of gratitude, I went through about 5 years of forgiveness.
Wow.
And I began to really look at aspects of my life in my early 60s, of ways in which I needed to first forgive myself for behaviors that created ill will, that created really immature circumstances where I burned bridges with people and organizations and schools and so forth through my own maturity and my own stupidity. And so I had to really start looking at how to forgive myself. And once I began to do that, I had to really look at the grudges I was holding with other people, and to really go through a process where I could forgive those that I feel, did me wrong, did me in, or whatever. And it's not so much condoning activity, because a lot of times, we're therapists and we hear stories of the most heinous abuse sometimes that people undergo from other people. And you really wonder about the human condition. And it's not so much about condoning behavior, I learned. It's just, I gotta move on. We have to move on. Let's forgive and move on, not condone. Because some behaviors need to have to be corrected, but just to move on. And so for that, I went through a good 5 years of just categorizing, going through my life, my people that I've known, my career, my first 2 marriages, and just going through that level of forgiveness. And then it just shifted into a sense of that gratitude. And I could really start looking at that deeper level of gratitude. Right. And I think it coincided with the gratitude for having a spiritual teacher, and deepening into my own spiritual process. And also the deepening of the intimacy of love in a marriage that I was having, that I never thought I could have.
Yeah.
You know, after a second marriage and you get divorced, and I was in the courthouse and I'm going, this doesn't work, relationship doesn't work, I'm never going to do it again, I'm done. And something happened and it worked.
So what happened? Was it a different type of selection you made, or was your behavior changed? I mean, what was the combination that made this work?
What makes it work? You know, it's interesting because I think in a marriage there has to be some sort of chemistry.
Yeah.
And that's an elusive term to try to even define, but I didn't have chemistry with my first wife. You know, we had a dream based on being in the S training together back in the early 80s.
Right.
And it was that kind of, we were in that rah S training, and we got married, and we just had no intimacy, no chemistry, except for the bonding through the processes that were happening in the S training. And it was somewhat the same with my second wife. And those relationships didn't last long because there was no chemistry. There was no opening to the possibility that I could work at this intimacy and feel safe. So for me, in kind of cracking open my own heart, I had to really feel safe. And I didn't feel safe, obviously. And that has also to do with my own level of immaturity at the time, especially my emotional immaturity. And it wasn't so much about, you know, blame or fault with my first 2 wives. It was my own personal immaturity. I can recognize that now, but, you know, looking back then, it's just a tsunami of emotions and all the anger and angst that goes on in a divorce. So the chemistry piece was a really important dynamic, that we were both wildly attracted to one another, and we had some depth. And my wife also had 2 previous marriages, and we knew that if we hit a rough spot, we made a commitment that we'd work on that.
Okay.
And the first date that we had, we knew we were going to get married. The first date, I'm telling you, it was incredible. And we're standing there on the edge of the ocean because we love the beach, and I was living close to the ocean. And so we were taking a walk on the beach and getting ready to kiss each other. And she just looked at me and she said, let's make a promise to each other, because this is going to last. No head games and no heart games.
Wow.
And so within that promise, on the first date, we have evolved a marriage and a relationship of intimacy that's been so incredibly rewarding, and one that I have so much gratitude for because of the support I get, not only from my career, but also from my spiritual practice, and just the benefits of having a marriage that's so incredible. So.
Well, that's very inspiring. As a guy, I've been married for 16 years. We can get better and better and better on down the road. And I see the way you and Kathy interact on the phone every single day. As soon as you're out of class, I just love it. It's like my daughter, who's 12, constantly on the phone with her boyfriend.
Right.
So that's really, really sweet to see. Okay, on to a bit more professional matters. You've had a lot of energy lately going into publishing of a new book.
Right.
You've been working on this for quite some time with your sister, which is very, very cool. So some of our listeners may have some hints about what your new book is about, because there was some mention of it in some of the other footage that I played. But why don't you clarify for us what the new book is about, the process of coming into why you decided to put this much energy into it?
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll start with the most recent event. The book actually got uploaded to the publisher last week.
Yay.
And I spent from Thanksgiving to the end of January approximately 200 hours in the final phase of knitting all the chapters together and working very closely with my sister. And it's very tedious work, but very rewarding work, especially when you get to the end of writing a book. And it's been very rewarding working with my sister. Mm-hmm. My sister is a colon hydrotherapist. She's been a professional massage therapist and colon hydrotherapist, both in the state of Florida and then in Tucson, Arizona, where she lives now, for probably well over 40 years. She has an awesome amount of clinical experience in the field of alternative health, and also has graduate degrees from Stanford and the University of Arizona. So she's one smart cookie. Mm-hmm. And she's older than I am, and she lets me know that from time to time, and that's great. But we have this love for the current situation on the planet because of what's happening with a contemporary client. And because we spend time together, we kept sharing with each other the challenges that the clients were having. And I asked her to contribute 7 chapters in my volume 5 of the series that I did a couple of years ago with North Atlantic Books. And so we started a working relationship there. And Sheila's piece was on sugar, and now we know how devastating sugar is.
Yeah.
And all the different changes that are going on in the research now affecting the human body. And I think more than anything else, in my own background as a body worker, it's our business. We're trying to help the human body and understanding the human body. And now the understanding goes deeper than the level of anatomy and physiology that you and I were just trained in from the beginning. And it's into that molecular metabolic understanding of the body, and that's where it's at. So my sister had the energy for it, I had the energy for it, to look at that level of information. We've probably looked at maybe 600 to 1,000 pieces of research in the last 3 years, and condensed it down into 20 chapters. Mm-hmm. We also have a contribution from a wonderful osteopath by the name of Mary Monroe, who's an English osteopath. And she wrote a chapter on the latest research on the endothelium. And you heard my lecture today on the endothelium.
Very interesting.
And you heard how excited I am about that. Mm-hmm. You know, how the endothelium is the chief regulator of homeostasis in the body now.
That's quite a statement.
It's a huge statement in terms of the research. And I thought, well, let's take the original principles of Andrew Taylor Still. The rule of the artery is supreme. I started looking at his books on the philosophy of osteopathy, started talking to osteopaths that knew about Andrew Taylor Still. Mm-hmm. I actually reviewed a paper that a European osteopath wrote to get out of osteopathic school on the relationship of biodynamics and the work of Andrew Taylor Still. So I started familiarizing myself with that. And I saw that within the history of osteopathy, that the original work was oriented towards the cardiovascular system.
Wow.
And then Sutherland came around and began to also orient it to the central nervous system and to the brain.
Yeah.
So all of these forces kind of came together, and we got this offer to do this book from Handspring Publishing in Edinburgh, Scotland. And if you look at their catalog of books, they're a new publisher. They've got a fabulous catalog on some of the latest information on fascia, on yoga therapy. It's a really amazing catalog, and we're really happy to join in with them and get this work out. And they're very pleased on getting it out as well, because we truly believe it's going to be beneficial for the planet, because we're talking about a pandemic. We're talking about the majority of the world's population in industrial societies like North America, China, and Russia that have metabolic syndromes. We have serious problems going on with the human body now at a metabolic level. And we've got antidotes now where we can take the principles of biodynamic craniosacral therapy and apply them to the cardiovascular system. It's really simple.
Yeah.
The endothelium needs help. The tension that's being held in the arteries and veins by the autonomic nervous system of the body, we can enter into the autonomic nervous system through that side door and really affect and help stabilize the autonomic system by putting our attention on the arteries. So all of that excitement led to this dynamic of putting the book together. And it's a lot of energy, especially, I want to say especially at my age, but it's a lot of energy.
And just so people who don't know, Michael's 70 now, doesn't look a day over 52 maybe.
Well, yeah, I'm about a year and a half away from 70,
Okay.
but I do say I'm approaching 70.
No, you're approaching.
And I'm
At this point, who cares?
right. all right. I'm 70. Franklin Sills is 70, so
Oh
you know
my gosh.
we're in that elite club of 70-year-olds. But Franklin's got me beat by a year or so.
So this kind of leads me into one of the other things I wanted to talk about is your new website, sheaheart.com, and kind of this new evolution of your teaching I'm seeing to come forth with this cardiovascular model. Can you talk a little bit more about why you're excited about the particular aspects of the cardiovascular model? I know that it's an antidote to some of the metabolic problems that we're seeing, but tell us a little bit more of the details about how you're working cardiovascularly with the biodynamic approach.
Well, you've asked about the new website. So I got so much feedback that my old website was just so so not cool and not so up to date and not so this and not so that.
Mine needs work too. They all do every
I
2
know,
years.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like we can do a new one every year. And I'm not a kid anymore, so I don't have a lot of attention on it. I don't really have attention on Facebook and LinkedIn and social media. But who's got time if I'm spending hundreds of hours writing? So,
Yeah, you got to make your priorities.
yeah, so the book is based on the working with the cardiovascular system, but it arises out of, obviously, the simultaneous work on a new website, sheaheart.com. So for those of you listening, you can go to the new website, and it's got much the same navigation tools and so forth as the old one. But I'm trying to codify this work on the cardiovascular system into a long-term training. So I've got right now 9 courses designed, 8 that have been implemented, over 500 students that have been trained, mainly in Europe, and I'm supervising 6 teachers that I'm training to do the cardiovascular work. Combined total of probably working with maybe 5,000 student or clients. So we have a base of information, and it's so positive, the feedback we're getting and the effect that this is having on the health and well-being of clients, that yes, it was time to put a new website together, but it was time also in conjunction with my own aging process to dive more deeply into my own spiritual practice. And it's, it's no secret that I'm a Buddhist, so, and as a result of that, and I have a teacher, and it's interesting, and that teacher is His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And then I get asked a lot, well, how did that happen? And do you meet him personally? And no, I haven't met him personally, but I went through a series of stages of initiations with him and his organization at large meetings, and went through the proper initiations in order to be linked to him and his teachings more closely. So as a result of that, I periodically do editorial work because the Dalai Lama's lineage in Tibet is the scholarly lineage. So I was tasked at the final initiation with doing scholarly work, so continuing to write. So I do all the other writing on the cardiovascular system and the therapeutic relationship and so forth. But I also began to do a lot of writing on compassion and how That is based on mindfulness and how we could really begin to look at manual therapy and biodynamic practice in general as a mindfulness-based manual therapy. And if we're going to look at it as a mindfulness-based manual therapy and begin engaging in skills that slow us down and allow us to become still, then that opens us up to a huge amount of research on compassion. Compassion is now not a romantic, religious dynamic at all. There's a lot of beautiful research on compassion. For the last 2 years before I wrote this book, I edited a book by Anne Weinstein that I highly recommend the audience that's listening to me right now at least take a look at. And it's by Norton Publishing in their Interpersonal Neurobiology series. And it's called Prenatal Development and Parents' Lived Experiences. And Anne wrote this book that's wonderfully illustrated with references, I think maybe 600 or 700 references on prenatal development. And what's happening, Ryan, is that there's a lot of bad news in the literature. There's a lot of bad news with metabolic syndromes. There's a lot of bad news when a woman who is pregnant undergoes stress and what's happening with her fetus and with her baby. And what happened is, and when I was on some of these calls and with the editorial team, and I'm on doctoral committees as well, looking at this literature, what happened is I got tired of the discussion of bad news. What is the antidote? And what arose out of that is the need for a compassion-based understanding of the therapeutic relationship and of bringing forward the research literature on compassion as an innate part of our biological process, as an innate part of our cellular process. And I could go more into that right now, but I can tell you that in editing Anne's book, she asked me if I would write an appendix. And I created a model called a compassion-based model of pregnancy, in which across the board we could get information into every therapist who's working at any level with a mom who's pregnant or a family that has a pregnant mom, and get this information on compassion and kindness and how to skillfully engage with a mom and a family. And it was very well received by Norton. And I'm very happy that I could bring that forward. And all of this then, at the same time happening with my spiritual process, because His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that anybody really that's involved with his teachings, he encourages that they start a center for the study of the human heart. So all of these things that we've just been talking about for the last couple of minutes were all happening simultaneously. I'm getting encouraged spiritually by His Holiness, and also I'm connected with Shambhala Training International, and I have been being trained as a meditation guide in teaching people meditation and doing guided meditation in the Shambhala Training Center where I live in West Palm Beach, Florida. And so consequently, I started this website, and it's subtitled The Center for the Study of the Human Heart. And what you'll find is this information on the study of approaching the cardiovascular system therapeutically, but also how to approach it from the point of view of compassion. How do we marry, put together, and link the information on interpersonal neurobiology, the work of Daniel Siegel, the work of Alan Shore, the work of Anne Weinstein that she's doing now, the work of Wendy McCarty and her work in pre and perinatal, and I could name other people, but how do we put all of this together in a compassion-based model? So I've got a lot of energy for that because it fits my spiritual practice, it fits my therapeutic practice, it fits my marriage when I lose my temper and, get that gripping, shaking like anger with my wife. How could you dare say that to me, or whatever the issue is, and just chilling out, and just having compassion for myself and chilling out, and then compassion for the situation. So all of this coincidentally then gets funneled into the book that I just uploaded with my sister, in which I talk about how to merge compassion into the therapeutic practice, along with Stephen Porges's work in establishing safety and down-regulating the autonomic nervous system, turning off defensive physiology, through mindfulness-based practices, but also through compassion-based practices, which I elaborate on. The book has over 100, it has exactly 100 photographs and numerous illustrations in my part of it, of the hand positions and the chapters on the establishment of mindfulness and compassion when you're touching an artery. Because when you're touching an artery, you're touching the heart of the person. You're touching their deep, deep, deep humanity.
The magical window to perceive through.
Yeah.
That's just fascinating to me. It was the one thing about acupuncture school that really, really grabbed my interest. And eventually why I left acupuncture school to just do cranial work.
Right.
Because I could stay in that particular sweet realm of perceiving through that fluid connection. So I am very interested, and I've been learning so much from these last couple classes that you've done here about how to interact with that blood realm. And there's a lifetime of study there. It's just, I'm very excited about where this is going to take me personally, where it's going to take our field as more and more people start exploring that biodynamic mindset in that vascular world.
Well, as you know, I've kind of teach from the model of the long tide, and I teach and practice from within the model of working with primary respiration and stillness and dynamic stillness. And I know in the biodynamic world that there's different styles. Some people object to me using the term models, within it, and so forth, and that's really okay. But in the lineage of biodynamic practice and biodynamic osteopathy, the guiding force for me therapeutically is primary respiration. And primary respiration is not one thing. You've heard me say that. It's a category of numerous experiences that it can include things like the breath of life, when we feel a very spiritual movement of grace in our body. And it can include feelings of compassion and feelings of love. So it's a broad category. It's a metaphor, basically, for a broad category of generative, creative, reparative phenomenon that Sutherland saw very clearly. When he was 75 years old, the year I was born is when he changed the model from biomechanical to biodynamic. And he saw the therapeutic force that we now call primary respiration making a correction in his client's body without him doing any mechanical work. Now, obviously, we know that the observer makes changes. This is why we have to spend a lot of time being mindful of our own body when we're working. But it changed the model because he saw and said, you can trust this therapeutic force that we now call primary respiration, or long tide, or the tide. And I have to say, that's been one of the main guiding elements. Yes, we all have a spiritual practice, and I think it's important, and that spiritual practice guides my own inner development. But I have a practice that includes primary respiration. I work with it, not just with clients. I go down to the beach, I sit there, and I come into a relationship with the horizon, and I feel primary respiration. I swim in the ocean in the summer, and I actually try to float there and feel primary respiration within the tidal movement of this vast ocean that I'm swimming in.
And you've got some videos about that on the YouTube channel if anybody wants to check that out.
I added 4 more videos last week because I heard a friend of mine say, I did a yoga workshop with a woman Lila Schwartz, and I think everyone should connect with her. She just published a book called Yoga for Back Pain. Now, Lila and I went to massage school in 1975. She's been a lifelong yoga teacher, and it was really amazing. And she came down, and I co-sponsored her back pain workshop because I periodically really need some help with my lower back. And her work was totally amazing. And she said, I've got 75 YouTubes with this back pain, and I only had 67. So I immediately went out that weekend and made 4 more just to kind of tease her. And I got them posted last week. At the same time, I was uploading, all my chapters to the publisher.
How competitive.
Yeah, how competitive. But Lila's great, and we have a great relationship. It was all in good fun. So, yes, I have a lot of YouTubes with the way in which I perceive and teach primary respiration, but I think I want the listening audience to hear, this is a way of life. This is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
I had training from numerous cranial osteopaths early in my career, and I can remember one cranial osteopath by the name of Nathan Josephs. Some of the listening audience will probably remember his name. He practiced in Fort Lauderdale, where I took a couple of courses from him, and then he moved to Boulder, Colorado, and I think he's since retired. And early in my career, I took a course from him, and he said, everybody out there needs to know that cranial work is a way of life. And of course, I thought he was a nutcase. And I'm like, a way of life? Are you kidding me? I'm here to learn technique.
Yeah.
I want another basket of goodies that I can put onto my client next week. And it took me years to realize that this is a way of life. Slowing down is a way of life. Coming into relationship with whatever you perceive primary respiration to be is a way of life. Slowing and stilling, becoming still. It's rooted in our biology, it's inside of our body, and it's all the way through us, and it's what makes us whole and connected to the natural world.
Yeah. I am so grateful myself, having been introduced to this relationship with primary respiration. It has helped me so much over the years. A constant companion that's right here, that can give me guidance in the moment about how to be whole, how to be in proper relationship.
Right.
It's such a gift. And every time I walk into a class for the first time to teach a new group, I just have so much love for what can happen in their lives if they can begin to feel this too.
Yes.
And so I'm still in love with it, and see where it leads people when I'm around someone like you or other teachers that have spent twice as much time as I have with it so far. What it's done for you to develop you personally, develop your ability to help others. I am on board. I'm still a fan of primary respiration.
I think I want to say to you and to the listening audience, because sometimes primary respiration, that term, or the tide or the long tide, it's kind of cognitive and it's kind of metaphorical. And in our community, as you know, there's many definitions of it. And I just want to say to the listening audience, and not sound too romantical about it, but every time you take a deep breath, you're probably synchronizing with primary respiration. Every time you're outside and you feel the breeze and the air movement, and it brushes across your body and it caresses your body, you're synchronizing with primary respiration. So at one level of understanding, primary respiration is related to our regular breath. It's also related to the air, movement of the air outside of us. And so I want to also keep it very simple, because it has multiple levels. But at the simple level, it's embodiment. We feel it when we take a deep breath. And we can feel it, when we feel our heart, because that's such a big part of my work right now, is that interoceptive awareness, bringing attention consciously to the movement of the heart as well as the breath. And this is primary respiration. It's simple.
Yeah.
It's not elusive. It's right there. Take a deep breath and you're right there.
And teaching can really pose a challenge, because You're expected to elaborate, clarify, complicate, when it really is so very basic and simple.
Right.
If we just slow everybody down and just feel, it begins to reveal itself
Right.
for us all.
Well, I sometimes think we're limited. I get on my bandwagon every now and then because a lot of my training and my own doctoral work years ago was in what's called phenomenology. And so in phenomenology is just honoring people's individual experience that they're having and the language that they bring to their own experience. And so over the past 10 years, I've been really challenged by the language that's handed down to us in the cranial model, because I can't use some of that language to describe my experience anymore. And I want my students to know that does not dishonor the lineage. It does not dishonor our teachers. And we need to know some of that basic language because it helps us form community. But there's a certain level at which we have to understand that language might not necessarily describe the experience we're expecting it to.
Yeah.
And so part of our work, and I feel the intention of the work I teach now, is embodiment. Coming into our body, dropping into that safe zone of the autonomic nervous system, letting primary respiration start to manifest its will in the body, and to really then listen to students' experience so that they can build their own vocabulary of wholeness that's free from the coded language that we use in the cranial world, but still honors it.
Yeah. Got to have an avenue for both of those to develop.
Right. Ultimately, I remember reading Bonnie Gintis's Sutherland Memorial Lecture that she gave probably 10 years ago. And for those of you in the listening audience, Bonnie Gintis, cranial osteopath, wonderful human being. She's also written a book. She was a continuum movement teacher.
Excellent book.
Excellent book, beautiful embryology in it. And she really said something that shifted my perspective in the Sutherland Memorial Lecture. And she said, we honor our teachers by mimicking the work that they've taught us. And we have to transition to owning the work ourselves and becoming our own therapist, our own cranial teacher. Not that we have to go out and teach the work, but that we've owned it and we do it our way.
Yeah.
And I know that can be controversial, but that's what I want to support in my students. It makes for a very hectic cranial community worldwide and internationally, to have a lot of free-spirited, cranial people running around, and that's okay.
I get the most feedback from listeners, from the guests that come on that have clearly really owned their own way of working, because there's something that sparkles about them being really alive and honest about their experience of it.
Right.
And people feel that, and it's inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. I love helping people own the work.
Yeah.
I think I said today in class, mimic what I'm teaching you with your clients next week, and just notice within 2 or 3 weeks, you will have just dropped about every hand position except for maybe 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. Because you've started to integrate the work, and maybe primary respiration is showing you another way. And I'll tell you something interesting that I love about the cardiovascular work, because I'm training in Europe approximately 5 or 6 teachers. I've got teachers in training. And guess what? None of them do it the way I do it. They all make up their own hand positions. So there's not even a set template. And that's the beauty of the cardiovascular work. Gradually, after you learn the basics of the work, you then go into this category of work where you're just like a shell game, moving your hands around, contacting the arteries. And why are we contacting the arteries? So that we can feel the entire vascular tree float on primary respiration, shift back to its organizing midline, of the heart. And you can feel this. You can feel how primary respiration does this. Because I've worked on very, very severe cardiac patients. I mean, with open heart surgeries and all sorts of different types of surgical interventions for the aorta and even serious coronary artery disease. And to feel the vascular tree of these patients all of a sudden lift up with primary respiration, and you're holding this tree just with these artery contacts and shift towards a midline of the heart and then settle, and to see the response that the clients have, it's beautiful. It's so rewarding. It's so rewarding.
Makes me want to get back in the clinic and get my hands on some people here again. A lot of these conversations do. Well, let's transition a little bit. I've got another topic that I wanted to make sure that we got to talk about for the benefit of the audience. And that's been, you've been involved with some work with the craniosacral therapy body of knowledge. Explain to me more about, this is a council that is happening. You told me today and I only caught part of it. What's going on with all that? All I know is there's some pretty heavy hitters coming together, put their minds together. So fill us in on that, please.
Well, let me just give a little background of what a body of knowledge is. So, about 8 or 9 years ago, the entire massage therapy community in the United States got together through the 6 political organizations that I don't want to say control, but have the agency and power to control the massage therapy industry,
Right.
like the American Massage and Therapy Association, Massage Therapy Foundation, National Certification Board for Therapeutic Massage and Bodywork, NCTB, and so forth. Well, these 6 organizations got together because the massage therapy world, and I've had a license to practice massage since 1975 in the state of Florida, and I wanted to give something back, and I was asked to apply to be a member of the task force that would write a body of knowledge. I didn't know what a body of knowledge was.
I remember when this was going down.
So the 6 stakeholders, they were called at the time, these 6 major organizations got together. They hired a project manager, and they then vetted the applicants, and I was chosen to be one of 7 or 8 participants on a task force that would write a body of knowledge for the entire massage therapy community of the United States. So then you have to ask, well, what does that mean? What's a body of knowledge? Well, professional organizations, when you really get way up, you get through the vetting of certification and you're recognized by the federal government and so forth. You really keep working your way up, medical organizations, big prestigious organizations. Many of them are based on having a body of knowledge that defines, here's the academic knowledge that needs to be unfolded, both in a basic training and in advanced trainings. And here's a category of the academic knowledge and the academic subjects as if you were defining it as a university type degree. And here is the skills and abilities that you have to teach in the classroom based on those knowledge bits. So you have to link the academic knowledge bits to the skills that you teach in the classroom to the abilities that you need to have in the clinic. So you've got 3 layers there, and they're called KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities. The skills and abilities, sometimes now the shorthand for that are competencies. So you'll see that in the literature sometimes is called competencies. And so I had some experience because I was a founding board member of the North American Biodynamic Craniosacral Therapy Association. And I have experience of consulting with 5 or 6 of the cranial associations in Europe, for a long time. So I had some experience of how to work with a group and this time more successfully than in the past, because in my youth I made a lot of mistakes. I want to apologize to anybody that's listening to this that might have been on some of those boards with me for my immaturity. But I learned how to come together. We had a beautiful project manager, and within a year's time, we created a body of knowledge that was ratified and accepted, and then became controversial because another organization started and created another body of knowledge. But that's okay. I mean, it's advancing it, because a body of knowledge is something that is defensible in a court of law, because you design standards of practice based on a body of knowledge.
Okay.
So the downstream from a body of knowledge is this standards of practice that, again, has to be defensible in a court of law.
Right.
And then from standards of practice, you design curriculum that unfolds in schools. So that's the way it works. So the body of knowledge has this horizontal knowledge, skills, and abilities, and then you get the vertical dynamic of body of knowledge, standards of practice, curriculum. That's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I've kind of oversimplified the whole thing. So you might ask then, well, where in the heck do I get the energy to do all the things that I've just described that I'm involved in the last, 30 or 40 minutes of this interview? Oh, I have fun because I've got the energy to do it. And so I thought, well, I go to London regularly, and I hang out with Franklin sometimes, and I hang out with Michael Kern because he sponsors me at the Craniosacral Therapy Education Trust. That's his school in London. And I love teaching there. And I said, hey guys, I got involved in this body of knowledge, and we really need to do that for our profession. What do you think? And so we just started, when we could, we'd hang out once or twice a year if I was around or they were around. And we started batting it around, and I had the template. I said, well, here's the template that we used. And, we started playing with it just for fun. With the intention being, can we get together and can we advance this community forward internationally? Because craniosacral therapy in biodynamics is really an international phenomenon. And so we wanted to be able to do that. And we wanted to also be able to know that there's tiers in which, and I don't mean crying tears, but layers or levels or tiers in which the body of knowledge gets vetted through the entire community. A core group of people gets together like we did. And in the massage therapy body of knowledge, we had to put this out to the entire massage therapy industry in the United States, not once, not twice, 3 times.
That sounds messy.
And to receive thousands of bits of feedback and then integrate that feedback into the document. I was willing to go the distance with that. But first you've got to form a core group, and that core group is now expanded to include 3 women who are very well experienced, incredible teachers. Badrena Chumi from Switzerland, incredible. Catherine Uclea, who is a dear friend of mine. She and I went through the Ray Castellino training. She's an incredible teacher. For those of you that are listening, I know some of you have studied with her, and you'd all agree. Everybody has to agree Catherine's wonderful, so let's agree. Badrena's wonderful. And Jane Shaw, who is the 3rd member, and she's a wonderful, wonderful practitioner and person. So we're at a very formative stage. The document is nowhere near being finished because we know when we put it out to the next level of the international community, we want to have something that's really agreed upon.
Yeah.
And the field, as you know, is constantly shifting. So the document has to be able to be a living document.
Yeah.
Open to change process, open to something that gets vetted, changed, and really is inclusive and not exclusive. So nobody really gets left out.
So that feedback that you get back, that is actually formative in changing the document much?
Yep.
Okay, so it's taken seriously and really incorporated in.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Because that's a lot of different people to consider their opinion coming in.
Well, we had a process by which, and it was all done through these really spectacular software programs
Okay.
in which the feedback would come in. And then our team of the task force was divided up into categories of who would deal with what type of input.
And they summarize.
And then it would get summarized, and then we would get on conference calls and we would discuss how we integrated it and how we would respond to it.
Okay.
Every single input was not necessarily integrated, because obviously you might get 100 pieces of input that are the same.
Yeah.
But everything was responded to. If we couldn't integrate it, we would respond to it and say why it couldn't be integrated.
Okay.
It's huge.
Yeah, this is a big undertaking. So what kind of a timeline do you see this kind
It's
of
open.
coming? Okay.
It's open-ended. I'll be in London next week, probably just talking and see how it's going along, because it's out of the boys' hands right now, and it really needed to get out of our hands. I mean, we were kind of getting bored with each other, spending more time eating English breakfasts and drinking way too much coffee, and telling jokes. And I say that lightly, because we got it, and it needed to go out and go into the community. And this has been such a male-dominant community for so many years, and it's so necessary to have a balanced community of men and women, and hear those voices and bring that forward.
Yeah.
So the answer to the question is it's open. I don't know. We'll likely hear within the next couple of months what the next step is. But I can tell you structurally what that means is when the document is ready, it'll get sent out to probably the teaching community.
Yeah.
Once that input is integrated, then it'll get sent out to the practitioner community.
Right.
And we'll do it in stages like that.
So when you get that in your email box, guys, you know where it's coming from and what's been involved in that being put together now. You are a very productive man. Just the things you've discussed tonight make me feel lazy. And I'm in a productive part of my life,
Right.
my career right now, with the podcast and expanding more with my teaching, making connections with so many wonderful people in our field. And so I'm very interested in people's approach to being productive in their life. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your writing process. How do you go about writing? Some people, they have to be inspired, and only when it comes, they sit down and they just bust out 20 pages. Other people, it's a laborious task they just continually work at to eventually get something out. Do you have any rituals or routines or approaches built around writing? Because you do a lot of writing.
Yeah, I do a lot of writing. It's very interesting. I've actually got several papers that I'm writing concurrently with all the other stuff. And I got to the end of this book on metabolic syndrome, and I in my back of my head I'm going, I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to do this again. This is so tedious. I'd rather be meditating. I'd rather be reading about the Buddha or whatever. But then I got that artist fever, because you get to the end of the project and you get to see the whole.
Yeah.
And you get to review everything before you send it in to make sure it's coherent.
Yeah.
And you go, wow, this has a midline.
Wow.
This has some value. But your question really has to do with the energy and the discipline I have around that. There's two issues there. Every writer, and I am a writer, I have to acknowledge that. I've always written. And I remember even coming out of high school into college, I was writing my adolescent poetry and tacking it on the walls. Mm-hmm. So I was always writing, and I've always written poetry. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know that. And in the first book on cranial work that I ever self-published, called a primer on craniosacral therapy. And I still have like 20 copies of that left that are unsold.
Well, you had somatic cranial work before that, which was the spiral bound.
The spiral bound pieces, those were the early renditions.
Yeah. You took some of that root and that ended up being the primer.
And then put it in the primer.
You hand wrote that out, didn't you? Because you didn't type back then.
All back then. I still don't type.
Well, I've seen you type at your office when I stay with you, but you're like a pecker with a finger at a time.
That's called the Columbus method. You find it and land on it. I do the finger here, the finger there. And people say, well, why don't you just learn the keyboard? And I've tried that. And it now with dictation software, it just makes it easy. I can dictate into my smartphone. I can dictate a whole essay now. And
is there an app you use for that, or what do you use for that?
Actually, what I do is I have my Gmail account on my smartphone only.
Okay.
And the smartphone, iPhone dictation software makes it so easy, and Gmail is really good. You can dictate for a really long time before it times out.
Okay, I see.
And it's just easy to edit. And then what I do is I forward that email to my regular email, Mike at michaelsheateaching.com. And I'm not going to use any of the Shea Hart email. And then from there, I download it and start doing a refined edit on it. That's one of the processes I use. But you're talking about the primer. Back then, I wrote everything longhand.
Yeah.
Because my favorite authors in the 1970s, some of them were very proud that they did their manuscripts longhand. So here's Michael writing these longhand things.
Cool.
So I wanted to be cool like the writers that I knew at the time. But discipline around writing is, for me, it's a spiritual practice. And so anytime I find the time, I have to be alert and I have to be awake. So if I'm tired, forget it.
So you write during the day or the morning usually?
I prefer early morning. Okay. Like you were not up this morning, so I got up early this morning and wrote for about a half an hour.
Okay.
And I prefer when I'm doing a book to have 2 to 3 hour segments. My wife knows that and does her best to try to not interrupt me. And then, but my wife also gives me a lot of help because sometimes I need a speed typist, and my wife does like 130 words a minute. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So sometimes I'll get an idea, and what I'll do is,
baby, I'm inspired.
I'm inspired, right, exactly. And I say, when can you give me 20 minutes? Because she can bang out a whole essay of mine in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And she'll say, tomorrow, but it's going to cost you 1 cranial session and 1 massage. I say, you got it. So we'll bang out this essay in 20 minutes, and it's there.
Great.
And over the years, I've had a number of speed typists, and I still work with one. I needed a lot of help. God bless Sarah Doctorman. She's a professor, associate professor of social work at Florida Atlantic University, old friend of mine. And she still helps me with typing. She's that kind of a friend. She's an associate professor.
Wow.
But she really helps me. So for me, the writing thing is now, I need a lot of help because I've got a lot of ideas I'd like to bring to fruition. And I find the help where I can.
Yeah.
If I got to dictate it into my phone, if I have to ask my wife, if I have to make an outline in my notebook and wait a couple of weeks, or if I can get an appointment with Sarah and we can, because she does 150 words a minute. Wow. Sarah, you're awesome. So at any rate, so that's the style.
Right. You mentioned discipline, and I'm kind of really noticing how many members of our community would benefit from a bit more of a disciplined study of the work. In whatever way that's meaningful for them. It may not necessarily be in-depth study of the text, but spending time every day working on maybe sensing primary respiration or some kind of sensory development skill. I'm wondering, what's your take on the importance of having discipline in your life?
Wow, that's a really good piece around discipline. You know, I really can only speak from my own experience because I think discipline also depends on one's aptitude for discipline, which means there's different types of discipline.
Yeah.
You know, I have a discipline around writing, I have a discipline around a meditation practice, but I was a military officer.
Yeah.
In my 20s, I had 7 or 8 years of military training, so I got very disciplined. And I like it. I like that level of discipline. I like being on time. I like reading and I like writing. And that doesn't mean that people are wrong if they're not on time or if they're, not reading or writing. I think everybody has an aptitude for discipline in their own way because discipline also is an inner discipline. Some people have an inner discipline around paying attention to an inner signal and an inner voice and an inner way of being in the world. And because I'm a teacher and you're a teacher, I have a discipline in the external world as well.
Yeah.
So it looks like I'm a very disciplined person, but that's a cultural model that's externally driven. And I think some people are also very spiritually disciplined. But spirituality is something that's unique to everyone. So my spiritual discipline is completely different than my wife's spiritual discipline. She likes to light fires at night because she's such an animist and engages in the natural world with the fire element. I love to get up at the crack of dawn and meditate. And that's completely opposite. Discipline around that. So people's spiritual disciplines are different and really have to be honored, but they have to be uncovered.
Yeah.
So I have found over the years that it doesn't serve me to get irritated with a student.
Yeah.
If the dog ate their homework, the dog ate their homework, because they're going to ingest the work in a different way. They're still showing up. So then the question is, and all of us as teachers have asked this so many times, why are they coming back? It doesn't seem like they're, they're getting it. But they're coming back and they're participating.
They're getting something.
It's very rare to have to dismiss a student from class. In the 18 or 20 foundation trainings I've done, maybe I've had to dismiss 3 or 4 students out of 300 or 400. That's a small percentage. So it's wonderful that way, and it's to honor that there's something inwardly working them. There's an inner discipline, and they're honoring their inner self, and they're coming back, and I'm supporting them. So
that's helpful. Okay, you have a morning routine then. Not that I've seen it, because I sleep right up until we leave to go to class.
it's true, you do.
I write at night and edit at night. I'm more like your wife. But you do like some yoga and you do a meditation in the morning. What kind of morning meditation do you do? What's your focus to bring your day?
Well, I kind of practice, what I've been trained to teach in Shambhala Training International. It's called a calm abiding meditation. It's kind of in the really old, older Buddhist lineage, technically called shamatha practice. But calm abiding involves mindfulness of the body. So I get into my meditation posture. I then spend time settling my body. And then I do mindfulness of the breath and heart. So I spend time coming back over and over and over again to the feeling of my body as it's breathing. Okay. So I want to feel my whole body as it's breathing. And I don't particularly track the inhale or exhale, but the breath as one unit of function in the body. What does that feel like? And what does it feel like with the heart sitting on top of the diaphragm? And then the third part of calm abiding is the wandering mind, how thoughts start to take over, how a lot of thinking starts to take over, and then concepts start to take over, and oh, I need to do this in class, and oh, I need to do this, and oh, I forgot that. And then I go, oh, I'm thinking. Or I don't even go, oh, I'm thinking. I just notice that, and I intrinsically, automatically come back to the breath. So I just go back and forth until there's a settling process, and that wandering thought thing settles into the breath and heart. And that's just, 20, 30 minutes. And then there's what's called a sadhana practice. And a sadhana is a written prayer. Let's say it's a written prayer. And it's from the lineage of the Dalai Lama. So I non-verbally recite these prayers before and after the meditation that I do. And I like to do a little bit of yoga just to stretch my fascia and make sure that I stretch out a little bit before I go.
That's fairly simple. I know there's an incredibly complex tradition of meditation coming at us in the Tibetan Buddhist schools, visualization and tantric practices and all that. And do you do some of those separately, or do you keep your practice pretty simple?
Well, the tantric practice, the visualization practice, is integrated into that.
Okay.
So if we look at the formal practice I do in the morning, I do an opening prayer. I then go right into shamatha for a minimum of 20 minutes, a maximum of 45 if I've got that kind of time. But that's not usually when I'm teaching. But it's a minimum of 20 minutes. At the end of that, there's a recitation of this sadhana, of a longer prayer. At the end of the longer prayer, there's a visualization practice. Where I just basically visualize that I'm in a relationship with my teacher. And I get to have that. I get to, I get to have and visualize the Dalai Lama, as if he's with me, and that there's a communication happening. And the beauty of it is I get to visualize him coming into my heart. Because it all resides in the heart. So then the visualization practice happens of coming into my heart, and then there's a closing prayer. Yeah. It's beautiful.
That is beautiful.
Yeah. And there's also an evening practice. So you don't get to see me do that either, because I usually do that before I go to bed. So I just sit on the edge of the bed and do the evening meditation practice. But it's shorter, 5 or 10 minutes. And I like to do more yoga in the evening. Because teaching all day and even just sitting here with this interview, I can feel my back starting to go, okay, we'll do a few extra hatha yoga tonight, a few extra asanas. So.
Cool. Well, on that note, sitting on this big plush couch in our Airbnb thing here, I don't want to keep you too much longer. So we'll start to kind of wrap here, but I got probably just 2 more topics for you. and these are fun and short.
Okay.
I like to have some fun questions for you. But,
right.
So if you weren't doing this work, if you weren't doing cranial work or writing or teaching, what else would you do? Of all the things you could do in the world, what would be your fantasy job or career?
Oh, Ryan, I wouldn't be here. I'd be dead. I was depressed as an adolescent. I was in a terrorist bombing attack in the military. I had a very severe case of PTSD coming out of the military. Got involved with a lot of recreational drugs in my 20s. If I hadn't gotten into body work, I'd been on a whole cycle of antidepressants. I'd probably be addicted to opioids because I'm in the VA medical system. We've got 500,000 veterans addicted to opioids right now. I'd be dead. It's the long and short of it. There's nothing else I'd be doing right now because I wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for body work. So, sorry, I don't have a romantic answer to that.
You don't want to be a rock star?
The question might be better if I were to retire right now. What would I be doing with my time? So,
all right.
And if I were to retire right now, but I am slowing down, so I am trying to schedule less, and that is happening this year. And I have as some of the listening audience knows that's been in classes of mine, I have a mango fixation.
That was my next question.
And-
We'll finish with this.
Okay.
Take it away.
So my wife and I have realized over the years that, part of our lifestyle is just not sustainable. And we wanted to start growing our own food. And I've always had a fascination with fruit trees. And I didn't have any luck with orange trees. And it turns out in Florida, you'd think, well, why not?
Yeah.
Well, it's monoculture. And that's a real big problem. And Florida turns out to not be the best place to grow citrus because it needs an arid climate.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Florida has the highest amount of insecticide and pesticide use of any state in the United States
Wow.
around these crops. But the long and short of it is I wasn't successful with citrus, but I love mangoes. And the reason I love mangoes is my mom introduced me to my first taste of mangoes when we moved to Florida on this barrier island in Palm Beach County in 1958. And my mom set me up. She loved mangoes, and I didn't know that Palm Beach County had this fabulous tradition from the 1920s of mango trees, cultivating unique hybrid varieties, just unique to that area. So I got involved with mango trees. I've got probably 12 to 15 trees in the ground. I have a mentor who is a member of the Zill family from the 1920s. He's in his 70s, and he comes up and he grafts the trees with these really exotic varieties. I filmed it all. I'm going to create a website for him and put on these grafting videos.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm learning how to graft. I've got a nursery with about 20 other trees in pots, other mango trees. My wife cultivates papaya trees. So, and we've tried avocados. We haven't had a lot of luck with avocados. And then we started to get into tomatoes, zucchini, and other vegetables. And so this is our second year, and we haven't been that successful because again, you're dealing with bugs.
Yeah.
South Florida, and we're of course not wanting to use insecticides and pesticides. So the outside of our house is part mango grove, part papaya grove, and part vegetable and tomatoes and so forth. So we're trying to be, and lettuces, and we're trying to be more sustainable and to really grow into that even more. So that's been a very fun thing, and that's what I'd be doing more of if I was, retired. And if I was retired, I'd be wanting to meditate 2 to 3 hours a day. Sorry, and I mean, I just would want that much time. I'd be wanting to read some more of the books on my bookshelf. I have an Amazon addiction. I must buy. How many of you listening to this right now buy a couple of books a month from Amazon? Raise your hand.
I bought
Okay.
one this afternoon. That's going to be there at the classroom tomorrow.
See?
Next day of delivery.
See? So I have this Amazon addiction, and I'd really like to read that stack of books that's by my bed. Sometimes it falls off the edge because it's grown so much, and then I have to farm it out and put the book somewhere else, and I keep getting that stack bigger. So I'd like to do more reading, and certainly more meditating, and more being with nature.
Yeah.
And clinical practice, because I teach a lot now, and I feel headed towards more of a settling down where I can be more involved with clinical practice. And I'm vitally interested in working with pregnant moms and babies. And so I really wanted to be more involved locally with that community, with getting this cardiovascular work into that. And we really haven't talked about that aspect of the work, but it's an incredibly important aspect of the work. And I've got a chapter for a book that I wrote with Ann Weinstein. It's in a book on pre and perinatal issues that's coming out next summer in England that John Wilkes has authored. Wonderful person. And in that book, Ann and I developed a 4-step therapeutic process for working with pregnant moms and families. And it's called compassion, connection.
Nice.
And it's all about how to listen to mom's story, how to help mom listen to the story of her embryo or fetus that's inside of her, and how to listen to that story through her heart and vascular system by just simply sensing the fetal heart and to sensing her own heart rate. This is what I'm interested in, because I'm at an age now where I'd really like to see the planet get healthier and better.
Yeah.
Okay? And how do we do that? It's with the next generation. So I'm putting a lot of my attention on the next generation. My cycle of teaching right now that I'm doing in Europe is on the next generation, on pregnancy, on babies. And I just finished that cycle in upstate New York as well. We'll probably do another cycle there.
I always feel so inspired when I get to spend some time with you. Makes me want to understand more, do more, accomplish more. And so I've really enjoyed being able to spend these last few days with you and do this interview. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Ryan.
For sharing with
You're very
us
welcome.
all and for all your work you've done. And I won't get too sappy or start crying. We can just wrap it up.
Well, Ryan, I love you. And you're just an amazing person. How long have we known each other?
A little over 18.
18
now.
years?
Mm-hmm.
So every time we're together, the appreciation and gratitude for you and really for what you're doing for the craniosacral therapy community worldwide. You know, we are a family.
Yeah.
We have our black sheep and our white sheep and so forth. But we are a family and we are a community. And I'm very grateful for the energy that you have, that you put into this. You think I have energy, I see the energy you have. And I want to thank you for that.
Well, thanks.
You're welcome.
It's nice to be seen.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to sign off now, everybody. I'm sure you're all digging this. It's always great to connect with Michael. And I'll probably have some closing statements afterwards, and we'll go from there.
Thanks.
Well, that was Michael Shea. I had a lot of fun doing that interview. I hope you guys enjoyed that, learning a little bit more about his involvement in the field lately. I recorded much of the lectures that he gave in our 4-day class here, and I will be going through those over the next month or so, doing some editing and pull out some juicy mango bits for you guys to enjoy from that. Check out Michael's site, Shea Heart. I will put a link to that in the show notes and a link to the craniosacral business class. So you can check out more about that, see if you're interested in joining and or getting in on the drawing. I will also put a link to the book Michael mentioned, Prenatal Development and Parents' Lived Experiences. I hope you're all doing well, and I'm going to sign off now. And if you have any feedback about the podcast, you know I like to hear it. It's Ryan at craniosacralpodcast.com. Let me know what you're doing with the work, your challenges, who you want to hear from, and we'll continue moving forward, helping you to help others.